The morning Gabriel Whitmore almost missed was the morning everything changed. He had been awake since 4, the way he always was, not because the world demanded it of him, but because silence was the only hour that belonged to him alone. At 33, Gabriel Whitmore was the kind of man whose name appeared in headlines before his coffee finished brewing. CEO of Whitmore Innovations, a technology empire worth $11 billion, a man who had built skyscrapers in 7 cities and reshaped the way the world communicated through fiber and satellite. His penthouse on the 42nd floor of the Whitmore Tower in downtown Chicago overlooked a city that, in many ways, he owned. And yet, in all that ownership, he possessed nothing that felt like home. The apartment was designed by someone who had charged $200,000 for the privilege. It had 16-foot ceilings, Italian marble floors that echoed every footstep, floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the city into a painting, and furniture so precisely arranged it felt more like a museum than a place where a man ate breakfast and forgot to sleep. There were no family photographs on the walls. No crayon drawings on the refrigerator. No shoes by the door except his own, always polished, always placed exactly parallel to one another. Gabriel poured his coffee standing at the kitchen island, tablet propped open in front of him, scrolling through acquisition reports for a company he was planning to absorb by Thursday. His mind was already 14 steps ahead. It always was. His therapist had once told him that he processed emotion the way other people process spreadsheets, efficiently, clinically, and at a distance. He had laughed at that. Then he had driven home alone and sat in his car in the parking garage for 22 minutes, without knowing why. He heard the knock at 7:12 in the morning. It was soft at first, so soft he thought he'd imagined it. Then it came again, 3 tiny raps against the front door, barely enough pressure to make a sound. Not the knock of a person. The knock of something smaller. Something uncertain. He set down his coffee. The staff elevator was separate from the main elevator, and the housekeeping team arrived Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Today was Wednesday. Elena Vasquez, his housekeeper of 14 months, always entered quietly through the service entrance at the east corridor using her keycard. She never knocked at the front door. Nobody knocked at Gabriel Whitmore's front door without being announced by 3 different layers of building security. He crossed the marble foyer slowly, almost cautiously, and opened the door. There, standing in the hallway, was the smallest human being Gabriel had seen up close in years. She was perhaps 3 years old. He would later learn she was exactly 3 years and 2 months, wearing pink pajamas printed with tiny yellow ducks. Her dark hair was tangled on one side, flattened from sleep. She had brown eyes so large they seemed to take up half her face, and they were wet now, quivering at the edges the way a still pond quivers just before a stone breaks the surface. In one hand, she clutched a stuffed rabbit, so worn its ears had nearly separated from its head. In the other hand, she held nothing, which somehow seemed sadder. She looked up at him. He looked down at her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Gabriel Whitmore, who had negotiated mergers in front of rooms full of hostile shareholders, who had testified before Senate subcommittees, who had once calmly talked down a panicking board of directors during a $40 billion market crash, felt, in the presence of this 3-year-old child, completely and utterly unequipped. Then she spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper, shaped by a mouth still learning what words could do. "Sir, my mom didn't wake up." The sentence hit him somewhere he hadn't known was still soft. He turned pale. He would not realize until later that he'd gripped the door frame. He would not realize until later that his coffee had gone cold on the counter, and he would never finish it. What he realized, In that precise moment, standing in the doorway of the most expensive apartment in Chicago, looking down at a little girl with a rabbit and wet eyes, was that nothing on his tablet mattered. "What's your name?" he asked, and his voice came out lower than he intended, rougher, like a door that hadn't been opened in a long time. "Lily," she said. "Lily." He crouched down to her level, which was something no one who worked for him had ever seen him do for anyone. "Where is your mama?" Lily looked back down the hallway toward the service corridor. "She's sleeping," she said. "But I called her and she didn't wake up, and I was hungry and she didn't make my oatmeal." Her chin wobbled then, the kind of wobble that precedes devastation. "She always makes my oatmeal." Gabriel stood. His mind was already moving, calculating, assessing, but underneath that machinery something older and less practiced was moving too. Something that felt almost like fear. Not the fear of losing a deal, or a market, or a client. A different fear. The fear of a world in which a 3-year-old girl walks alone down a hallway looking for someone to help her mother wake up. "Show me," he said quietly. "Take me to her." Lily looked at him for one more second, this giant man in a dark gray shirt with coffee on his breath and serious eyes, and then she reached up and took his hand. Her fingers were impossibly small wrapped around his. He let her lead him. The service corridor was a part of his building he had never walked through. Why would he? The infrastructure of his life, the cleaning and the catering and the maintenance, happened invisibly, the way it was designed to. Elena Vasquez worked 3 mornings a week, and Gabriel had spoken to her perhaps 15 times in 14 months, always briefly, always professionally. He knew she was punctual, thorough, and quiet. He knew she was raising a child. He had not thought to know much else. Elena's auxiliary access room, a small chamber provided to live-in service staff when early morning shifts began before the main elevators opened, was at the end of the east corridor. The door was slightly ajar. Lily pushed it open with her small shoulder, the stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. Elena Vasquez was on the floor. She was 28 years old, dark-haired, slight, still wearing her street clothes. She had never even changed into her uniform. She was breathing. Gabriel confirmed that in the first 2 seconds, pressing 2 fingers to her neck and finding a pulse. But her breathing was shallow and her skin was cold and damp, and she was completely unresponsive to his voice. He called 911 before he had fully straightened up. While he spoke to the dispatcher, he looked at Lily. Lily was standing beside her mother, holding Elena's hand with both of hers, the rabbit pressed against her chest, watching Gabriel with those enormous brown eyes as though she had decided, without evidence, without history, without any reason at all, that he was going to fix this. He didn't know yet how much of the rest of his life would be spent trying to deserve that trust. But he knew, standing in that corridor with the dispatcher in his ear and a 3-year-old's faith resting on his shoulders, that he was not going to put it down. The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. Gabriel knew this because he counted, not obsessively, the way anxiety counts, but deliberately, the way a man counts when counting is the only useful thing left to do. He crouched beside Elena Vasquez and monitored her breathing while Lily sat cross-legged on the floor 2 feet away, holding her rabbit with both arms, watching everything with a seriousness that belonged to someone much older than 3 years and 2 months. She didn't cry. That was what struck him most. She had cried in the hallway, or nearly had, that wobbling chin, those quivering eyes. But here, beside her mother, she had steadied herself, as though proximity to Elena was enough to borrow calm from, even when Elena was the source of the crisis. Children, Gabriel would learn, are often braver in the presence of the person they love most, even when that person cannot see them being brave. "Is she going to be okay?" Lily asked. "Not for the first time." She had asked it 3 times now, at intervals, the way a person checks a door to make sure it's locked. "The doctors are coming," Gabriel said, which was not an answer. He knew it wasn't. But he also knew that yes was a promise he wasn't positioned to make, and I don't know was a weight no 3-year-old should have to carry alone. So he gave her the only true and useful thing he had. "Help is on the way." Lily considered this. Then she reached out and placed her small hand on her mother's forearm, lightly, the way you touch something precious. "It's okay, Mommy," she said softly. "The sir is here." Gabriel felt something shift behind his sternum. Not a medical event. Something else entirely. The sir is here. He had been called many things in 33 years. Gabriel. Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore. Boss, CEO, chairman, sir. He had been called ruthless by a columnist in the Wall Street Journal and visionary by a profile in Forbes and cold by a woman he had dated for 4 months before she gave up trying to find something warm underneath the competence. He had built an empire on a reputation for precision and unemotional execution. Words like warm and present had never appeared in descriptions of him. But in a service corridor on the 42nd floor, a 3-year-old girl had just told her unconscious mother that it was okay, because the sir was there. As though Gabriel Whitmore's mere presence constituted safety. As though she had looked at him in that doorway and made a calculation that had nothing to do with his net worth or his title or any of the machinery he had spent his adult life building. She had simply looked at him and decided he was someone who would help. He pressed his hand briefly against Elena's cool forehead. "Wake up," he thought, with a force that surprised him. "Your daughter needs you to wake up." When the paramedics arrived, Gabriel stood back and watched them work with the focused efficiency of people who had done this hundreds of times. They asked questions he answered from what little he knew, found her unresponsive, pulse present, breathing shallow, no visible injury. He told them about Lily, that she was Elena's daughter, that she had come to find him when her mother didn't wake. One of the paramedics, a young woman with short red hair, glanced at Lily with practiced compassion and then looked back at Gabriel. "Are you family?" she asked. "No," he said. And then, because Lily was standing right there holding her rabbit with both arms and watching him with those brown eyes. "But I'll stay with her." They took Elena on a gurney. Lily watched her mother go, and her face did something terrible, a compression, a flicker of something that was trying very hard not to become falling apart. She reached for Gabriel's hand again, the same instinct as the hallway, and he gave it to her without thinking. "Where are they taking Mommy?" she asked. "To the hospital," he said. "So, the doctors can help her feel better." "Will it hurt her?" "No," he said. "They're going to take good care of her." Lily thought about this. "Okay," she said, in the voice of someone practicing okay. "Can I bring Rosie?" She held up the rabbit. "Yes," he said. "Absolutely bring Rosie." He called his driver from the elevator, and they were at Northwestern Memorial in 12 minutes. Gabriel had given substantial endowments to this hospital's cardiac and neurology wings. The administrator recognized him at the door, and Gabriel held up a quiet hand before the woman could begin any of the usual deference. "Elena Vasquez," he said. "She came in by ambulance. I need an update when there is one, please, and a quiet place for her daughter to wait." They were taken to a private family waiting room, soft chairs, a small table, a window looking out onto a courtyard where pigeons moved along a stone ledge with purposeful indifference to the dramas playing out inside. Gabriel sat in one of the soft chairs, and Lily climbed up beside him without asking permission, which he found he didn't mind at all. "Are you hungry?" he asked. She looked at him. "I didn't get my oatmeal." "I know." He pulled out his phone and looked at her. "What else do you like?" "Banana pancakes," she said immediately, as though she had been waiting for this question for some time. "With the little chips." "Chocolate chips. The little ones." She held up her fingers to demonstrate smallness. Mommy says the big ones are too much. Gabriel almost smiled. Mommy says the big ones are too much. He ordered banana pancakes with mini chocolate chips from a cafe 2 blocks away, adding a side of scrambled eggs and a fruit cup because he was not a man who did anything halfway, not even feeding a toddler in a hospital waiting room. While they waited, Lily told him about Rosie. Rosie the rabbit was 4 years old, which was older than Lily herself, because Rosie had belonged to her mommy first, and then her mommy had given her to Lily when Lily was a baby in the hospital, because Lily had come too early and the hospital had been cold and scary, and Mommy had put Rosie in the little bed with her so she wouldn't be alone. Lily reported all of this with the calm authority of someone recounting documented history. Your mom sounds like a good mom, Gabriel said. Lily nodded. She's the best mom. Then she looked up at him. Do you have a mom? The question, delivered with the total unself-consciousness of a child, landed differently than it would have from an adult. Adults never asked Gabriel personal questions directly. They approached them sideways, wrapped in pleasantries, or didn't ask at all. I did, he said. She passed away when I was 12. Lily absorbed this. That's very sad, she said simply. It was, he agreed. She patted his hand with hers, 3 small pats, the way you comfort someone. Then she went back to adjusting Rosie's ears. It was the most natural condolence he had ever received for a grief that was 21 years old. The pancakes arrived. Lily ate with focused dedication, occasionally offering a piece to Rosie out of politeness, and Gabriel drank the coffee he'd ordered and found himself, strangely and completely unexpectedly, not wishing he were somewhere else. His phone had buzzed 14 times with messages from his assistant and his COO and 2 board members. He had not looked at any of them. The doctor came at 9:47. Elena Vasquez had experienced a hypoglycemic episode, a severe drop in blood sugar, most likely related to an unmanaged diabetic condition she may not have known she had, or had been managing poorly under significant stress. She was stable. She was conscious. She was asking about her daughter. Gabriel exhaled a breath he had been holding for 2 hours. She's asking about her daughter, the doctor said again, and looked at Lily, who had gone very still on her chair. My mommy's awake? Lily asked. Your mommy is awake, the doctor said. Lily slid off the chair. She looked at Gabriel. Can we go see her? We, she said. Not can I. We. Yes, Gabriel said. We can go see her. Elena Vasquez had been trying to make herself invisible for 3 years. She had gotten quite good at it. Good enough that she sometimes frightened herself, the way she could walk into a room, perform her work, and leave without anyone registering that a human being had been present at all. Good enough that she had furnished her small studio apartment in Pilsen with second-hand things that had no weight to them, nothing that felt like it was hers, in case she needed to leave quickly. She had done that before. Learned not to anchor herself to places. Lily was the only thing she had ever fully anchored herself to. When Gabriel Whitmore walked into her hospital room with Lily's hand in his and Lily's face breaking open into the kind of relief that only exists in children because adults have learned to brace themselves for it, Elena felt 2 things simultaneously. The first was the pure, flooding warmth of her daughter's weight landing against her chest, Lily climbing up onto the bed without ceremony, Rosie pressed between them, Lily saying "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy" like a song she had been holding inside since the hallway. The second thing Elena felt was shame. She had worked for Gabriel Whitmore for 14 months, and she had been careful, so careful, to remain exactly what she was hired to be, efficient, invisible, professional. She ironed the Egyptian cotton sheets to the temperature he preferred. She organized the refrigerator according to the system he'd outlined in the new hire document his executive assistant had sent her. She polished the Italian marble floors to a reflection. She had never been late. She had never asked for anything. She had never, not once, allowed the boundary between her life and his to become permeable. And now her 3-year-old daughter had walked down a private hallway and taken the hand of the most powerful man in Chicago. "Mr. Whitmore," Elena said over Lily's head. Her voice was mortifyingly weak, still thin from the episode. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for whatever, Lily." "She came to find help," Gabriel said. He was standing just inside the doorway, hands in the pockets of his dark pants, looking at Elena with an expression she couldn't quite categorize. Not irritation. Not inconvenience. Something quieter than that. She did exactly the right thing. "She shouldn't have been. I never should have. I had no idea. I was unwell. I thought I was just tired. I've been—" Elena stopped. She pressed her lips together. She was not going to do this in front of him. She was not going to unravel in front of Gabriel Whitmore. "I'll arrange for someone to cover my Wednesday shift while I recover. I'll have it sorted by this afternoon. Please don't worry about—" "Elena." She stopped. He said her name the way people say the name of someone they are asking to stop moving for a moment. Not unkind, just firm. "You nearly lost consciousness alone in a building with your 3-year-old daughter," he said quietly. "The last thing I am thinking about is the Wednesday shift." Elena looked at him. Then she looked down at Lily, who was pressed against her side examining Rosie's ear with tremendous concentration, utterly unbothered by the weight of the adult conversation happening above her. "She told me you make her oatmeal every morning," Gabriel said. Elena blinked. Yes. "And banana pancakes with a small chocolate chips." She almost laughed. "She told you about the chips." She had opinions about the size. This time Elena did laugh, briefly, and it hurt something in her chest that wasn't physical. She always has opinions. She stroked Lily's hair, the tangled side from sleep, smoothing it gently. "She's very sure of herself." She walked down an unfamiliar hallway to knock on a stranger's door to get help for her mother, Gabriel said. "She should be sure of herself." Elena was quiet for a moment. The doctor had told her the diagnosis, type 2 diabetes, likely developing for a year or more, masked by fatigue and stress, and the kind of self-neglect that happens when you are pouring every resource you have into keeping a child alive and well and warm. She had not been to a doctor in 2 years. She had not had health insurance for 4 of the last 6 years. She had been managing on the edge, the way people do when the margin between surviving and not surviving is measured in grocery bills and copays. "I should have managed my health better," she said, and she was not saying it to Gabriel. She was saying it to herself, the way she always talked to herself, quietly, sternly, without mercy. "How long have you been doing this alone?" Gabriel asked. Elena looked up at him. The question was careful, not presumptuous, not prying. It was the question of someone who had been watching the math and found it didn't add up. "Since Lily was born," she said. "Her father, it doesn't matter. It's been Lily and me." Gabriel nodded once. He didn't push. He didn't offer sympathy in the form of expressions that asked her to perform her pain for him. He just nodded, and she understood from the nod that he had heard her, that he wasn't going to make a production of it, and she felt, strangely and unexpectedly, that she could breathe slightly more easily. "You'll take the week," he said. "Not a question. Paid. And when you're discharged, I'm going to have someone from my HR team reach out about adding health coverage to your employment package. That should have been offered when you started. That was an oversight." Elena stared at him. "Mr. Whitmore, that's not." "It's not charity," he said, reading her correctly before she could say it. "It's a correction to an error. You work for my household. You should have health coverage. It's straightforward." She wanted to argue. She was constitutionally inclined to argue, to refuse, to insist she was fine, to make herself smaller so no one would think she was asking for more than she deserved. She had been doing it for years. She was very tired of it. Lily looked up from Rosie's ear. "Mommy," she said. "The sir got me banana pancakes." Elena looked at Gabriel. Gabriel looked at the wall slightly to his left with an expression that was not quite a smile, but was the shape of one. "With the little chips," Lily added, for accuracy. Elena laughed again, and this time it didn't hurt quite so much. Gabriel did not believe in fate. He believed in data, in patterns, in the logical consequence of actions compounding over time. He had built his fortune on that belief. He had organized his entire emotional life around it, the idea that things happen for reasons that could be traced and mapped and, if necessary, corrected. He could not map what happened in the weeks after Elena's hospitalization. It began practically as things with Gabriel always began. He contacted his HR director and restructured Elena's employment contract to include full medical coverage, retroactive dental, and a modest but meaningful salary adjustment that brought her compensation to what it should have been from the beginning. He told himself this was administrative correction, nothing more. He had a team that handled household staffing. He was simply applying oversight where oversight had been lacking. Then he found himself, on a Wednesday morning, checking whether Elena had returned to work before his assistant reminded him. She had. She had returned exactly when she said she would, moving through his apartment with the same quiet efficiency as before, except that now he was aware of her in a way he hadn't been. He noticed when she favored her left hand, which sometimes happened when her blood sugar dipped. He noticed when she brought Lily to the service entrance because Lily's daycare had a teacher in service day. He noticed all of it from behind his closed office door, which was insane, because he had never noticed Elena Vasquez at all. Lily noticed him. On the Tuesday when Elena brought her, Gabriel had made it clear months ago that staff could use the building amenities freely, though no one ever had. Lily sat up at the kitchen island with her coloring books while Elena worked. And when Gabriel emerged for coffee at 10:30, Lily looked up from a half-finished picture of a horse and said, "You're the sir." "I am," he agreed. "I'm Lily. I remember." He poured his coffee. "Is that a horse?" "It's a unicorn," she said, with exactly enough patience to communicate that the distinction was significant. "Of course." He looked at the drawing. "Where's its horn?" "I'm saving the horn for last," she said. "It's the best part." He stood at the counter for a moment. Elena was in the other room, changing the sheets. He could hear the quiet industriousness of her movements. Lily was working on her unicorn with the focus of a professional. "What color will the horn be?" he asked. Lily looked at her crayon collection with great seriousness. "Gold," she said. Obviously. He almost laughed. It caught him off guard, the way laughter sometimes does when it comes from a place that hasn't been used in a while. He turned back to his coffee and stood at the window with the city spread out below him and found that the city looked, from this angle, at this moment, slightly more interesting than it had looked this morning. It continued in small moments. A drawing left on his counter, a colorful mass that Lily told him was him and her and Mommy and Rosie at the park, and which he propped against his coffee machine, inexplicably. A question from Lily about why his apartment had no toys, which led to a conversation about what kinds of toys she thought it should have, which led to Gabriel purchasing a small basket of age-appropriate items for the kitchen island that he told himself were for her Wednesday visits, and that he definitely didn't spend 45 minutes selecting from a parenting website at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night. And then there was Elena. She had been invisible to him by design, her own design, carefully maintained. But the hospitalization had cracked something in that design, the way cold cracks stone. Not because she had become less professional. If anything, she was more precise, more thorough than before. But Gabriel found himself understanding now that the efficiency was not absence of self, but an extraordinary act of self-discipline from a person carrying a great deal. He began, carefully, to speak to her. Not personally, at first. He left notes, handwritten on good paper, which his assistant thought was eccentric, about things in the apartment that didn't need fixing but that he used as reasons to leave notes. The orchid in the eastern window seems to be struggling. I don't know anything about orchids. She responded in kind, on a small notepad left on his counter. It needs less water and more light. Move it closer to the window. He moved the orchid. It recovered. He wrote, "You were right." She wrote back, "I usually am." He read that note 3 times. He began leaving coffee for her. Not as a directive. He simply started making 2 cups in the morning on Wednesdays, leaving hers on the kitchen island with a small note that said the brand or the roast, the way a person does when they are uncertain if the other person takes sugar and are trying to provide options without making it into something it isn't. The first time, she left the cup untouched. The second time, she took it but left a note. "You used too much sugar. I take half." The third time he got the sugar right and she left no note, and he considered this progress. Their conversations grew by increments. About the orchid, then about other plants. About the city. About a documentary he had watched about deep-sea exploration that she had also seen. She watched documentaries late at night, after Lily was asleep, as a way of feeling like she was still learning, still expanding, still more than the sum of her daily requirements. He hadn't known this about her. He was startled by how much he wanted to know more. She was 28, and she had read more books than most people he knew. She borrowed them from the library because she couldn't afford to buy them, and she kept a small notebook where she wrote down lines that stopped her breath, lines she wanted to remember. She was raising Lily on a budget that would make his quarterly expense report look like an error. She had given up a scholarship to the University of Illinois in her sophomore year when her mother became ill, and she had never gone back, not because she couldn't, but because life had kept requiring other things of her, and she had kept saying yes to its requirements. She was extraordinary, and she had been standing in his home for 14 months, and he had not seen her. He had a great deal to make up for. He wasn't sure yet what form that would take. But he was, for the first time in a very long time, genuinely interested in figuring it out. It was Lily who said it first. Because it was always Lily, 3 years old and unburdened by the machinery of adult self-protection, Lily who said the things that the grown-ups were arranging elaborate architectures of behavior around without saying. It was a Saturday in March, for months after the morning in the hallway, and they were in Gabriel's kitchen. All 3 of them, which had become a thing that happened now, a thing with no official name or arrangement, a thing that existed because one Wednesday Elena had mentioned that she and Lily's weekend routine was the farmer's market on Milwaukee Avenue, and Gabriel had said without thinking, "I've never been to a farmer's market," and Elena had looked at him with an expression he was still cataloging, and on Saturday morning she had knocked on the front door. The front door, not the service entrance, which was its own small seismic event, and said, "We're going to the market. Are you coming or not?" He had been coming ever since. Today they had come back with peaches and fresh sourdough and a bunch of tulips Lily had chosen with enormous deliberateness. Yellow, because yellow was Mommy's favorite color, and also, she had informed Gabriel gravely, the color of happiness. They were making French toast with the bread and the peaches, which had been Gabriel's idea, which had surprised him as much as anyone. He cooked rarely and badly, but Lily had appointed herself his supervisor, and the process was proceeding under her rigorous quality control. "More cinnamon," Lily said, from her perch on the counter stool. "You said that last time," Gabriel said. "Because you keep putting in not enough." Elena, cutting peaches at the island, pressed her lips together to suppress a smile. She had a beautiful smile. He had noticed this in the months of small moments, the way it arrived gradually rather than all at once, the way it seemed like something she gave carefully to things that had earned it. "How much cinnamon is enough?" Gabriel asked Lily. Lily held up her fingers again, the gesture she used for a lot. "That's not a unit of measurement," he said. "It is in my kitchen," she said. "My kitchen," she said. Elena looked up. Gabriel looked at Elena. For a moment the peach and the bread and the cinnamon were all suspended in the warm Saturday light coming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and Gabriel thought, my kitchen. This child, this 3-year-old girl, had said my kitchen in his apartment on the 42nd floor, and it sounded, in the way that true things sound, completely correct. He added more cinnamon. While the French toast cooked, Lily carried the tulips to the dining table and arranged them in a water glass with the gravity of a florist. She stepped back, assessed, moved one tulip 2 inches to the left.
Perfect, she announced.
You have good taste, Gabriel said. I know, she said. Elena laughed, the full laugh now, the one he'd been finding ways to earn for months, and it filled the kitchen the way yellow tulips filled a water glass, simply, completely, making the space look like itself. They ate at the table he had never eaten at before Elena and Lily. He had always taken his meals at the kitchen island, standing over a screen. The table was a $10,000 piece of hand-finished walnut that seated 12 and had, before this winter, served primarily as a surface for contract documents. Now it had French toast on it, and a water glass of yellow tulips and a 3-year-old who was eating with tremendous enthusiasm and telling them about a dream she'd had in which Rosie could fly. Where did she fly? Elena asked.
To the market, Lily said.
To get peaches. Because she wanted some. Practical rabbit, Gabriel said. She's very smart, Lily said seriously. After breakfast, Lily disappeared to the living room with her coloring books. She had a dedicated box now in the cabinet by the window, a development that had arrived without announcement and that both adults had noted without comment, and Elena and Gabriel cleaned up side by side at the sink, passing dishes and soap and drying cloths with the ease of a practiced choreography. She called it her kitchen, Elena said quietly, without looking at him. I heard. A pause. Water running. The soft sound of Lily singing to herself in the next room, a song with improvised words about a flying rabbit and peaches. I don't know what we're doing, Elena said. Still quiet. I need to know what we're doing. Gabriel set down the dish he was holding and turned to face her. This was the conversation they had been approaching for 4 months, the one that waited on the other side of every orchid note and farmer's market Saturday and cinnamon argument. He had known it was coming. He realized, ready for it. I know what I'm doing, he said. She looked at him. Her eyes were dark and careful and honest.
Tell me, she said.
I'm trying to be worthy of a 3-year-old's decision, he said. She walked down a hallway and decided I was someone who could help. I've been trying, since that morning, to become the person she thought I was. Elena was quiet for a long moment. She has good instincts, she finally said softly. She does, Gabriel said. She gets it from her mother. Elena looked at him for a long moment, one of those moments where everything that is going to happen is already visible in outline, the way you can see the shape of a building before it's built if you know how to read the plans. Then she turned back to the sink. But she was smiling. And the apartment sounded, for the first time in Gabriel Whitmore's memory, like something other than an echo. The morning Gabriel Whitmore proposed was not remarkable. It didn't take place at a restaurant or on a rooftop or in front of a skyline artfully arranged for the occasion. He had thought about those things briefly. He had the resources for spectacle, for grand gestures, for choreographed moments designed to photograph well. He had rejected all of it because Elena Vasquez was not a woman who wanted to be photographed. She was a woman who wanted to be known. These are very different things, and it had taken Gabriel Whitmore 33 years and one 3-year-old with a rabbit to understand the difference. It was a Sunday in October, 8 months after the morning in the hallway. Chicago had turned the color of Elena's eyes in certain light, deep amber, burning at the edges. Lily had started at a small preschool 3 mornings a week and came home with art projects of increasing ambition and very specific opinions about which of them should be displayed on Gabriel's refrigerator. There were currently 7. He had added a second magnet strip to accommodate. That morning they had taken Lily to the park. Their park now, the one on the lakefront with the big climbing structure Lily called the castle, and the bench where Elena drank her coffee, and Gabriel ate the apple he brought every Sunday because Elena had quietly told him 6 months ago that she was worried about his eating habits, and he had immediately, without saying anything about it, started eating better. They had walked back along the lake path with Lily between them, holding a hand each, which she insisted on because she liked to swing, and they had obliged her by swinging her forward on the count of 3 until she shrieked with delight. Lily was napping now. Elena was at the kitchen island, reading an actual book, a novel she'd borrowed from the library, with a library card she'd had for 20 years that was one of her most prized possessions. Gabriel sat across from her with his coffee and did not pretend to look at his laptop. He looked at her instead. She looked up. "What?" she said, the way she always said it when she caught him, direct, slightly amused, completely herself. "I want to ask you something," he said. She set her book down. She read him the way she had learned to read him, this man who had slowly, painstakingly, over months of small honesty, learned to put his actual feelings somewhere visible instead of behind 12 floors of glass. She read him, and her expression became careful and quiet. He reached into his pocket. He had bought the ring 3 weeks ago. He had not bought it at a famous jeweler or consulted a stylist. He had bought it at a small estate jewelry shop on Milwaukee Avenue, the street where they went to the market, the street that had started all of this. After Elena had paused in front of the window for 3 seconds longer than she paused in front of anything else, then walked on quickly in the way she walked away from things she thought she couldn't have. The ring was a warm champagne diamond in a simple gold setting. It looked like something that had a history to it, something that was made for continuity rather than display. He placed it on the island between them. Elena looked at it for a long moment. "I have spent my entire adult life," Gabriel said, "building things I thought would feel like enough. And none of them did. I didn't understand why, until a 3-year-old knocked on my door and took my hand and showed me what enough actually looks like. It looks like this. It looks like you and Lily and Saturday markets and the cinnamon argument and the orchid and 7 pieces of refrigerator art and a flying rabbit named Rosie and the bench by the lake," and he stopped. He was not accustomed to speeches. He was not going to give one. "It looks like a home," he said quietly. "I want to build that with you. If you'll let me." Elena looked at the ring. She looked at him. "Lily helped you, didn't she?" she said. He almost smiled. "I consulted her, yes." "What did she say?" "She said to make sure you cry happy tears," he said. "She said you make 2 kinds, and it's important to get the right ones." Elena laughed. Her eyes were bright. There were tears in them, and they were, unmistakably, undeniably, the right kind. "I've been trying to be invisible my whole life," she said softly. "I thought it was safer. I thought if I made myself small enough, nothing could disappoint me. And then my daughter walked down a hallway and decided you were safe." She looked at him. She was right. "She usually is," he said. Elena picked up the ring. He was not going to make her wait for him to do it. She was a woman who did things herself, who had always done things herself, and he loved her for it. She looked at it for a moment. This small, warm circle that had waited in a window on Milwaukee Avenue for the right person to pause in front of it. "Yes," she said. Simply. The way she said things that she meant completely. Gabriel exhaled. He reached across the island and she gave him her hand. The same way, 14 months ago, Lily had given him hers in a hallway, and he had followed a small child through a door into a life he hadn't known he was going to want. He slid the ring onto her finger. From the hallway came the small sound of a door opening, and then small feet on the marble floor, and then Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway in her socks with Rosie under her arm, blinking sleepily. She looked at them. She looked at their joined hands. She looked at her mother's eyes. "Are those the happy tears?" she asked. "Yes, baby," Elena said, and her voice broke, just slightly, at the edges. Lily processed this. Then she crossed the kitchen and climbed up onto the stool beside Elena and pressed herself against her mother's side, rabbit between them, the way she always did, home finding home, the way it does. She looked up at Gabriel. "Does this mean you're my person?" she asked. Gabriel looked at this child, this small, certain, brave child who had walked down a hallway and changed everything, and felt, in his chest, the uncomplicated and overwhelming answer. "Yes," he said. "That's exactly what it means." Lily considered this with appropriate gravity. Then she nodded, satisfied, the way she nodded when the cinnamon was finally right. "Okay," she said. "Then you should probably get a toy box. A real one, not just the basket." And Gabriel laughed, fully, from somewhere deep and long closed, and finally, at 33 years old, open, and Elena laughed, and Lily smiled at both of them with the serene confidence of someone who had known, from the very beginning, exactly how this story was going to end. Outside, the October light fell golden through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the 7 pieces of refrigerator art held fast on their magnets, and the yellow tulips, a new bunch, from last Saturday, stood in their water glass on the walnut table. The apartment, for the first time in its life, was full, not with things, with them. And that, finally, was enough. The end. For every mother who kept going when it was hardest. For every child who was brave enough to ask for help. And for the walls we build around ourselves, and the small hands brave enough to knock on them.